Welcome to a slow, beginner-friendly lesson on a config file mini-lab, made for absolute beginners. The capstone of the phase. This is the capstone of phase 0.6. Everything you learned in this phase, files, pathlib, JSON, comes together in one small project. You will read a JSON configuration file, pull values out of it, use those values in real code, and write the result to an output file. This is the kind of script you will write again and again in real work. We go slow. Every line gets explained. By the end you will have a complete, runnable example that ties the whole phase together. Everything comes together. Here is what we are combining. From the files lesson, you use with open to read and write. From pathlib, you use path to build the file paths without string concatenation. From the JSON lesson, you use json.load to turn the file's text into Python dictionaries. And from phase 0.5, you navigate those dictionaries with square brackets and the get method. 4 pieces, 1 script. That is what capstones do. They show you how the pieces fit. 4 skills, 1 script. Configuration files let you change what a program does without touching its code. The settings live in a file, the program reads them and adapts. Config drives code. Meet the input. This is a file named settings.json. It holds configuration for a small tool. There is an app name, a version, a nested database block with host and port, and a debug flag. Real configuration files look exactly like this, a mix of strings, numbers, booleans, and nested blocks. Your job in this lab is to read this file, pull out the values you need, and use them in code. Meet the input. Start with pathlib. Import path. Build a path that points at settings.json. Before you try to read it, check whether it exists. If it does not, print a friendly message and stop. This is the robust habit, never assume a file is there. The path object is cross-platform, so this exact code works on Mac OS, Linux, and Windows. You write it once and it just works. Robust paths first. Here is the shape of the whole script. You point pathlib at the config file. You open it and parse the text into a Python dictionary with json.load. You pull values out of that dictionary and use them to decide what to do, where to connect, what to print. Finally, you write some output to another file, often using the values from the config. Read, parse, use, write. 4 steps, 1 small program. Read, parse, use, write. Now the key step. Import JSON. Open the file with the path object's open method. It works just like the built-in open, but it is cleaner because you already have the path. Inside the with block, call json.load, passing the file object. json.load reads the text, parses it, and hands you back a Python dictionary. The whole file is now a dict. You can check with type, it says dict. Plain text in, structured data out. Text becomes a dict. Now that config is a dictionary, you access values by key, exactly like any dictionary from phase 0.5. Config square brackets app name gives the string my tool. Config square brackets version gives the string 1.2. Config square brackets debug gives the boolean true. Notice that JSON types become Python types automatically. Strings stay strings, numbers stay numbers, true and false become true and false. You do not convert anything by hand. Read by key. Real config is rarely flat. Database settings live under a database key, logging under a logging key. You learn to reach in and pull out exactly the value you need. Reach into nesting. Here is the part that connects back to nested dictionaries. The database key holds another dictionary, host and port. To reach inside, you stack the lookups. Config square brackets database gives you that inner dictionary. Then you add square brackets host to get localhost, or square brackets port to get 5432. Each pair of brackets goes one level deeper. This is exactly how you navigate any nested structure, JSON, API responses, big configuration trees. Stack the brackets. The same pattern works at any depth. Here the config has a logging block with a level and a file. To read the level, you chain, config square brackets logging, then square brackets level. To read the file, config square brackets logging, then square brackets file. Once you see the pattern, you can navigate any JSON no matter how deeply nested. Each step in the path is 1 pair of square brackets. 1 bracket per level. Square brackets are direct. If the key is missing, Python raises key error and your script crashes. For optional values, use the get method instead. Config.get of timeout returns none if timeout is not in the file. Even better, config.get of timeout, 30 returns 30 as a default. This is how robust scripts handle missing configuration. They fall back to a sensible default instead of crashing. Use get for anything that might be optional. Safe defaults win. When you do not know exactly what is in a config file, inspect it. Keys gives you every top-level key. Values gives you every top-level value. Items gives you key value pairs together. And the in keyword checks whether a key exists. These 4 tools are how you explore an unfamiliar config, print the keys, see what is there, then reach for the values you care about. Great for debugging when a config does not behave the way you expect. Inspect what is there, now use the values. If config square brackets debug is true, print that debug mode is on. Pull host and port out of the database block and print an F string saying you are connecting. This is the whole point of configuration. Your code reads values from the file and behaves differently based on what it finds. Change the file, restart the script, and the behavior changes. No code edits, no redeploys. That is the power of config-driven programs. Let config drive behavior. Everything in this phase comes together here. You read a file, you use its values, and you write something new back to disk. That is a real program. The full loop. Now prepare to write output. Use pathlib to build the output path. Create an output folder with mtr, passing parents equals true and exist OK equals true so it never crashes. Then build the full path by joining with the / operator, output dir /report.txt. You now have a path that points at output /report.txt, ready to be written. Notice how pathlib makes the intent obvious, read it left to right and you know exactly where the file will land. Build the output path. Open the output path in write mode, that is the W inside open. Inside the with block, call write for each line you want to save. Pull values straight from config as you write. Close happens automatically at the end of the with block. Finally print a confirmation with the path you wrote to. Run this script and you get a fresh report file on disk, built entirely from values that came out of the config. Read in, write out. Save your work. Sometimes you want to write JSON, not plain text. JSON.dump does the reverse of JSON.load, it takes a Python object and writes it as JSON to a file. Build a dictionary called summary with the values you care about. Open a file for writing. Call JSON.dump, passing the dict and the file. Indent equals 2 makes the output pretty printed with 2 spaces per level, easy for humans to read. Read JSON in, process it, write JSON out, a full round trip. Round trip JSON. Here is the whole script in one place. Import JSON and path. Open settings.json, parse it into a dict called config. Make sure the output folder exists. Build the report path. Open the report for writing and save 2 lines pulled from the config. Print where you wrote. About 12 lines of real, useful Python. Read it top to bottom, every line does one job, and the jobs add up to a working tool. This is what phase 0.6 has been building toward. 12 real lines. Why does this pattern matter? Because almost every real Python program reads configuration. Database settings live in a JSON file. Feature flags live in a JSON file. API keys, logging levels, output paths, all configuration. The shape is always the same. Open the file, parse the JSON, pull out the values, use them. Master this small script and you have the skeleton of every config-driven tool you will ever write. Everything else is just bigger. This shape is everywhere. Quick self-check. Can you write the 3 lines that open a JSON file and turn it into a dict? Can you reach into a nested block like config database host? Can you use get to handle a missing key gracefully? And can you write the 4 lines that build an output path and write a line to it? If any feels shaky, type the full script from the previous part into a real file and run it. Then change the config and run it again. Type it yourself. Here is the capstone in one breath. Configuration files let you change behavior without editing code. JSON.load turns the file's text into a Python dictionary. Chain square brackets reach into nested values like config database host. Pathlib builds robust output paths and with open writes them. Read, parse, use, write. 4 steps, 1 small program, and the foundation of every config-driven script you will ever write. Read, parse, use, write. Phase A is complete. You started with types and variables. You learned collections, loops, and conditions. You learned files, pathlib, JSON, and CSV. You just wrote a real end-to-end script. That is a foundation most learners take months to build. From here, the next phase takes you into functions, modules, and error handling, turning these building blocks into larger programs. Or, if any atom in phase A still feels shaky, revisit it. The foundation has to be solid before the walls go up. The foundation is yours. Thanks for completing the phase A.6 capstone. The foundation is yours. The capstone of the phase.